Good afternoon. Nice to see you all. My name is Adam Vaughan. I'm the former Member of Parliament for this riding, Spadina Fort York, and I'm here with my colleague Karina Gould. We're running for leadership of the Liberal Party and MP from Burlington.
Yep.
Welcome to the riding.
Thank you.
Welcome to Toronto.
Glad to be here.
We're standing in front of 129 Peter Street, which is a city-run facility that was opened up while I was a city councillor in Toronto. It was supposed to be a housing referral centre, a place where people who are street engaged, living in encampments, living in shelters, long-term, chronically homeless individuals would come here. They'd be housed for a day or two and then sent on their way to new housing. The trouble is there was no new housing to send them to, and as a result, this facility, which is supposed to be an office and a temporary shelter, has become a permanent shelter. And the reason there was no housing to send them to is because the federal government at the time, led by Stephen Harper with the housing minister by the name of Pierre Poilievre, had a housing policy which was not to have a housing policy. In fact, they were trying to sell CMHC, and they are defunding all social housing programs right across the country. If we hadn't been elected in 2015, the federal government's spending on housing would have been reduced to below $1 billion by the time of 2017. That was the forecast it was on. That was the program that Pierre Poilievre had put in place. But one of the policies he's put in place was one of the most remarkably stupid policies I think this country's ever seen. We had homelessness supports established by Paul Martin and a housing accord established by Paul Martin to tackle the hardest to house in this country, which are youth, young people on the street, living in shelters, living rough, living in encampments. The Conservative government, led by Pierre Poilievre as housing minister, had a policy in place that refused to allow federal supports to be used to house young people who are homeless. If you're a young person running away from home, running away from custody, running away from shelters, you're running away from something which is a hell of a lot scarier than the street. And for young people, the street is one of the most dangerous places in this country they can live, especially if you're female, especially if you're Indigenous, especially if you're from the LGBTQ and free-spirited communities. This was the Conservative tough love housing policy, the one that Pierre Poilievre is promising to return Canada to, where we abandon kids on the street. It's unacceptable. I'm here today to announce a housing strategy, re-announce a housing strategy, but to announce the housing strategy that Karina Gould has adopted as her party platform as she seeks to be leader of the Liberal Party. It's a platform that I think is going to address and end homelessness in this country, not simply manage it, because we know that ending homelessness is cheaper than managing it. And the city's experience tells us why. Running shelters is no place for people. People don't like shelters. That's why they stay in encampments. That's why they go live rough in ravines and in our parks. This policy aims to end homelessness by doing three very important things. First of all, build supportive housing. It has a housing accord in it that will show you how you marry housing capital investments with healthcare dollars to create the supportive housing network across the country we need to end homelessness once and for all in Canada. The second thing is it builds out the rental sector in an affordable way, in particular on co-op and social housing, but right across the rental housing market. And then finally, yes, first-time buyers need support. There needs to be a bridge to home ownership and a bridge, quite frankly, to middle-class security in this country, and the policy addresses that as well. But first and foremost, it ends homelessness, not by putting people in jails or forcing them into treatment, but by building supportive housing networks and putting the supports in place to care for people and end this crisis once and for all. A crisis which is, as I said, more expensive to manage than it is to solve, and more humane to solve than it is to manage. And with that, I'll pass it along to my colleague, Karina.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you so much, Adam. I'm so delighted to be here in Toronto and to be here with Adam Vaughan. We've been working together since 2015, and he is one of the foremost housing advocates in this country. And we know that we have a housing crisis in Canada, and it's going to take an industrial effort to make sure that we are housing people, getting first-time home buyers into the market, and providing affordable housing right across the housing continuum. And while the Liberal government has done a lot when it comes to our national housing strategy, there is much more that we can do. Housing needs to be a human right in this country, and we need to be able to fulfill that promise. And so, as Adam mentioned, there are three pillars to this plan. One is ending homelessness. We talk about the toxic drug supply, we talk about overdoses, we talk about addictions, but if we are truly going to get people off the streets, we need to make sure that they have supportive housing to go to. So this plan would create an accord program with the provinces and territories where the federal government works to house people through an expanded rapid housing initiative, and then has agreements with provinces and territories to provide those wraparound supports to make sure that people can be successful and they can stay off of the streets and lead successful lives. It also means that we want to ensure that we are building more modular housing to rapidly increase the supply that we have available in our country. That is something that is so important. We know that we do not have enough houses in Canada to get people into the houses that they need. And so we need to build more modular homes that are climate resilient, faster and cheaper to build. We also need to accelerate housing production to build faster and smarter in Canada. When it comes to home ownership and market regulation, the housing market today is constrained by outdated models, zoning regulations, and a lack of investment in new housing infrastructure. We will partner with municipalities to streamline zoning and build more homes faster with a new round of housing accelerator funding. We also need to crack down on predatory speculation. And what Adam mentioned and what I'm very committed to is expanding support for the first-time home buyers program by boosting this initiative to make it up to 50% of an eligible mortgage. Right now it's between 5 and 10%, and we just don't see the uptake. But this can be fully repaid to the Government of Canada over a 25-year mortgage or at the time of sale. But in a community like Toronto, where it is extremely expensive to get into the market, this will help first-time home buyers get a toehold in and increase their equity over time. We also will offer a tax credit of $2,000 on the provincial land transfer tax for first-time home buyers. And when it comes to ending homelessness and tackling affordability, we cannot be a prosperous nation of opportunity if we allow homelessness to persist. This policy tackles homelessness at the root cause, focusing on expanding supportive housing programs and emergency assistance that provide not just shelter, but a path to stability. National supportive housing will ensure that people stay off the streets and that they are successful. And one of the most successful programs that we've had in Canada that the federal government has got out of the business of doing is cooperative housing. I want to supercharge cooperative housing models in this country, which provide access to housing across this continuum of affordability. We need to tackle homelessness and we need to tackle affordability. Housing is a human right, and this is something that we can do as Canadians. It is a national project and it is an imperative for us to do because every Canadian should have access to a safe and affordable and dignified place to live. So thank you very much, and I'm available for your questions.
As you know, the next fundraising deadline for leadership candidates is tomorrow. Do you expect to have the money, and how difficult will it be to raise the next $135,000 for the following deadline in 11 days?
So look, the party has put forward an extremely aggressive fundraising deadline. They have tried to make it as hard as possible for only a few candidates to participate in this race. But what I can tell you is my campaign is powered by people. 85% of my donations are $200 or less, and I have received support from thousands of people across this country. We're doing everything to meet those fundraising deadlines, and I have to say that I am buoyed by the incredible support that I am getting from everyday Canadians. My campaign doesn't have the deep pockets of some of the other candidates, but what it does have is people power. And I have to say that we have had great fundraising results, and we're going to keep going. So despite the efforts of the party establishment to keep people out of this race, I'm in it and I'm excited about it.
Do you commit to spending 2% of Canada's GDP on defense spending? And if so, when do you hope to hit that target?
Absolutely. And I think it's an imperative for us. I think we can hit it by 2027. And one of the ways that I'm going to help increase defense spending is by increasing the salaries of our Canadian Armed Forces personnel. Our CAF members are there for us in our time of greatest need. In COVID, in this city, when long-term care facilities were strained and were unable to contain their outbreaks, who went in? are CAF personnel. When there are natural disasters around this country, who is on the front lines? Our CAF personnel. We do not pay them sufficiently for the incredible service and work that they do, protecting us and being there for us in our time of greatest need. So we can do this, but we have to make that decision, and we have to support our incredible men and women who serve in the military. And the other way that I would go about that is by immediately appointing a procurement czar. We have so much military procurement equipment that is on the docket that we're not getting fast enough. And so not only do we need to ensure that our military is paid adequately for the work that they do, we need to make sure they have the equipment that they need to do the job. And so we need to really clean up and streamline our military procurement so that we can accelerate our commitment to 2%.
Question for you in French.
OK? Oui, bien sûr.
Avec Trump et les tarifs, quelle est votre opinion sur une pipeline de la côté est?
Bon, avec Trump et les tarifs, ce qu'on a besoin, c'est d'avoir une approche du Équipe Canada. Nous sommes dans un moment où la relation avec les États-Unis qui était toujours là, qui était toujours une de confiance, est un peu sous confiance à ce moment. Et les Canadiens ne peuvent pas avoir la confiance pendant les prochaines 4 ans et peut-être de plus, d'avoir un accès au marché des États-Unis. C'est ce comme gouvernement, comme Équipe Canada, donc nous devrions travailler, et comme Premier ministre sera une de mes priorités, assurer qu'on continue avec cette bonne relation avec les États-Unis, mais on doit ouvrir les possibilités d'avoir du commerce meilleur entre les provinces et territoires dans le Canada, d'avoir le commerce Est-Ouest au lieu de seulement Nord-Sud, et aussi ouvrir des marchés internationaux aussi. Alors, on doit avoir ces conversations pour assurer que le Canada, notre économie, nos jobs sont protégés. Merci. Yeah, sure. So when it comes to President Trump and his threat of tariffs, we need to ensure that Canada is protecting our economy. The long-standing relationship that we've had with the United States is obviously something that I would prioritize as Prime Minister. However, that relationship is also based on trust. And I think that what we've seen in the past 2 weeks and what we'll continue to see over the next 4 years is that we might not be able to rely on the US as much as we have in the past. And so while we need to continue to nurture and develop that relationship, we also need to make sure that we can trade internally. And so we can't just rely on north-south trade. We also have to be able to trade internally, east-west, here in Canada, and also open new markets internationally. Honestly, the federal government has done a good job following the last Trump administration of building those trade relations with Europe, with Asia, with Latin America. But now we need to do everything we can to help Canadian businesses and products and services get to those markets. Great.
Getting back to the housing plan, we've heard about the problems of homelessness in smaller communities across the country, in Ontario, and not always works for bigger cities. It's called your plan to kind of just like
Yeah.
like these smaller communities have major problems with homelessness, people not being able to get housing, pay, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes, this is a plan for every community in Canada. And you know, we have seen over the past couple of years encampments grow, not just in big cities, but even in my community in Burlington, in rural communities. And so we have to be able to work with every single community across this country to tackle the issues in the way that is reflected in their community. And so absolutely, this is a plan for every community in Canada. Great. Anything you want to add? No?
Good.
Okay, thank you so much. Merci. Okay. Great, thanks. Yeah.